Okay, so this is part 2 of my rifle project. I posted the first video I posted. It just I think I had the Picatinny rail on it, but that was it. And then I got the scope rings. I usually like to get the scope rings last because when I put the scope on and then I add my little pieces to see what the height is, then I know what scope rings to get. But the guy I bought, the gun dealer I bought this rifle from, I told him what scope I was getting. If I was using a Picatinny rail, he said, well, you need to get the low ring height. So I did. These scope rings are TPS TRS. I think they're tactical scope rings. They're aluminum aircraft grade. I think it's what, 7071, I think is the number, if that means anything to y'all or not. The scope itself is a Leupold VX-5HD 2-10 by 42 millimeter. It's a really nice scope. It is a duplex, has a duplex reticle, and it also has the Firedot on it, and that's really nice. I actually tested this scope in low light, just in the backyard. Heavy shade, about 16 to 19 minutes after sunset, and I could still see well enough. And I turned the Firedot on its lowest setting. I could have made a really nice shot on like a big buck or a bear or something like that easily. So, and I have found I'm probably going to keep the setting probably at 2 power. The max probably is going to be at 4 power. I have found, and it's probably a common thing, but the higher I go up, I found the more I'm shaking the rifle. But if I keep it at its lowest setting, or just maybe at the max at 4, I can put the crosshairs dead on center and pull the trigger without moving the rifle. So that's that. Here was a big issue for me. I am only 5'6" tall. My length of pull is 13 inches. This rifle with a stock recoil pad was 13 7/8, and I also wear a hunting pack, so that added the shoulder strap added another ½ inch. So this was not going to work for me. So I purchased a Limbsaver grind to fit recoil pad, and I can't remember the type this is. This is not the straight recoil pad. The top and the bottom measurements are 1 3/8 inches. The center is 1 3/16 inches. I'm sorry if this information is boring you, but this might help somebody who's want to do the same thing that I did. So it's like, okay, how much stock do I cut off? So I originally was going to cut the stock off at 7/8. I added 3/16 because I figured this is probably, when you're measuring your length of pull, you hook your tape from here and then you hook it on the trigger, and I got 13 inches when I cut this stock, and then counted for the recoil pad when I cut it. So that turned out well. There's a video you can look at on YouTube about this recoil pad. There's a guy from Limbsaver who shows he actually uses 3 grades of sandpaper on a belt sander. The first one is 60 grit, the second is 110 grit, and the third is 220 grit. Well, at work they have a machine shop with a belt sander, and they only had 120 grit, so I put blue tape around it, and I was very careful. I got a few nicks on the stock, but it's not anything that would stick out, as you know, my eye's going to immediately go to it, but I can't even see it. So that turned out really well. And then back to this rail, when I adjusted my scope for the perfect eye relief, this Picatinny rail, I don't know why I got the longer one, but I did, and it was too close to that scope. I could slip 3 pieces of paper through it, just stock paper. That's just too little space. So took the scope off, and with the rings, of course. I didn't loosen this. I just loosened these up and took that off, and took the Picatinny rail off and ran it through the bandsaw. And a real straight cut, turned out real well. Put that back on, and this was a challenge to get the scope level. My first attempt at doing it, it was horrible. I don't have a gun vise, and I was told by multiple people, you don't need a gun vise. You can just put it up against something that is, completely plumb. And I did that, but I was using I think it was a 2x6, and I had pieces of wood, so I was trying to get the rifle level across and down the length, and that was a chore. So once I got that stable, then I put this on, and I never could get it level. I would get it, it'd be dead on when I started, and then when I started to get to the point when I was using the fat wrench, and I got to the point where I was about to turn to click for the screws to be completely tight, the bubble would move off, and I spent 3-4 hours trying to fix it, and it never would work. So I just let it go. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna tighten this down. I'll work on this another day and figure it out. So the next day, I came across a video on YouTube of a guy that showed an easier way to level a scope, and that he used a plumb bob. So he just took a piece of string or rope and attached it to like a 1/2 inch thick bolt. And I've got some of those, so I attached one. I actually hooked it to a ladder, stuck it in the kitchen, and what he did was he didn't even have the scope on the rifle. He took the scope and the scope rings and had it on like a level surface, and then lined it up with a string and slowly tightened it down. So I did that, and it took only an hour, and I had it dead on. So today's step, I bore sighted it, and I thought I'm gonna have to make some adjustments. I got a rangefinder from a neighbor, and put the rifle up on a little stand I made. I don't have an official stand, so I put it up on the stand and pulled the bolt out. I held the guns real still, and I looked through the bore, then I looked through the scope. It looked dead on. I checked it 3-4 more times, and the scope's dead on. So last step, this will be part 3, which will be the next video. It will be actually sighting in the rifle. I've got 3 different loads. I've got one from Nosler. It's an Accubon 165 grain. This is a 30-06, by the way. So Nosler Accubon 165 grain. I've got a Barnes 175 grain, and it's the Vortex long range load. And then the other one is a Hornady Outfitter. It's 180 grain. So I apologize if I'm boring. I'm just talking a bunch of maybe nonsense to some people, but hopefully this helps. And of course, I always like to show this rifle all the way down. I'm not using the muzzle brake. I'm used to shooting a lightweight, a 6.5 pound pump 12 gauge with slugs and turkey shot, so this 30-06 is going to be tame compared to that. So looking forward to part 3.